Welcome to the Beyond the Bestseller podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Schubnecht, and today's guest is Amber Fuhriman. She's the author of Break Your Bullshit Box. Let's get into it. Hi, Amber. Thank you so much for joining me on the Beyond the Bestseller podcast. I would love to start out by having you introduce yourself.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here. I think very similar to you, talking about books is one of my favorite things in the whole world. So this is going to be a lot of fun. For those who don't know me, my name's Amber Fuhriman. I'm a recovering attorney, success strategist. I help people understand the excuses that hold them back from their day-to-day life, which is why the book is called Break Your Bullshit Box. It's really interesting because for a long time I got a pushback on that title because people were like, but my excuses are real. And I'm not saying that they're not. I'm sure they feel very, very real. The conversation that we get to have is that not everything that feels real is real. And that's the whole purpose and conversation of the book. And that really comes from my life experiences, from dealing with grief to dealing with creating villains in my life to satisfy my victimhood necessity, to changing careers, to all of the things that come along. So we can dig into any of that you want. But I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, I want to start with the recovering attorney. So, are you no longer a practicing attorney?
It's so interesting because one day I might tell you no, and then the next day I'll say yes. I don't have a law firm anymore. It is just me. And because I like to keep my options open, I'm still licensed because I will never take another bar exam. So I'll stay licensed until the day I die.
Sure.
Because that's just not happening. I think for me, the recovering attorney conversation, and this is so much of kind of what the book is about and what I alluded to in the intro. Um, I've spent so much of my time thinking that society wanted to be me to be a certain thing, that there were expectations placed on my identity by myself and by others. So the recovering attorney conversation, yes, it's not my full-time gig anymore. And it's more related to the purpose of it, right? So I tell people all the time, it's not recovering in the way that I'm not practicing anymore. It's recovering in the way that I don't need the hit of validation of the attorney title in order to feel worthy, valued, and needed, right? I didn't realize until I started making the career shift, going into speaking and coaching and writing the book, how much my self-worth depended on people respecting me and how easily respect came with letters after your name.
Okay. Super interesting. So, my husband and I have this conversation often because I, how do I put this? So, I just started my own business
Okay.
and I'm like,
Congratulations. And I'm
thank
sorry at the
you.
same time.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. But I'm like at ground, well, I can't say ground zero. I have clients and whatever, but I mean, it's like, you know, but it's interesting the way that people respond to you when you tell them, like when I would tell them like, oh, I'm in marketing, I work for this company, like whatever, I would give them some of that information. And it was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And then my husband would say that he owns a restaurant and people would go, oh my gosh, tell me all about that, and
Yeah.
and like they would like totally dive into that conversation. And I would get so mad at him because I'm like, nobody cares what I do, even though, I'm the breadwinner for our family. Like my job's was a big deal. And like, nobody cared. But I saw the shift when I started my agency like a month ago, and I would start telling people like, oh yeah, I have this marketing agency, and the interest was so different, and how people perceive you, even though the money could be a totally different thing. Like nobody has any
Yeah.
concept of that.
It's so true. And then when you're in a profession like the legal industry, or we'll go doctors, pharmacies, postgraduate professions that carry with them this prestige of money and status and respect, try dealing with the look on people's faces when you tell them that you're leaving that to become a speaker, coach, and author.
I actually, so I would say when you said that, I was like, huh, that's
Yeah, I was, it is so thankful. I am so thankful that I have the circle that I have, the resources that I have, the mindset training that I have. because otherwise it would have crushed me. And what I mean by that is there's only so many people that you know, love, and respect that you can handle looking at you like you have seven heads and asking if you've lost your mind before you start questioning your life choices. And this happens when I opened my first business. When I opened the law firm for the first time and went out on my own, my mom was terrified for me. When I started to transition from practicing law full time to working in the speaking coaching world, my mom was terrified for me. And it really comes from the fact that they just don't understand the world, right? People can't understand what it is that they don't live in. And the majority of society, as we know it, lives in this work for the government, get a 9 to 5, retire with a 401k, live off your social security. And that's just not the way I'm built. It's not the way that
Mhm.
I'm wired. And I was for so long. And I don't think that actually, let me take that back. I was never wired like that. I think that's why I became an attorney, because it was going against the grain that made so much sense to me. Fitting inside the box was supposed to make the pain stop hurting, though. Like, I have an immense story with grief. And growing up in the 80s and the 90s, we were told in that period of time that all success came from money, prestige, and a career. And so to me, it was like, I don't need counseling. I don't need therapy. I don't need to talk about the people that were here one day and then I went to bed and the next day I woke up and they weren't here. All I need is a certain level of success and then everything else is going to fall into place. And
Mhm.
it was going and getting that success. I joke, and it's not really a joke, but it's funny, that being an attorney was supposed to bring me success, happiness, and fulfillment. And instead, it brought me panic attacks, depression, and anxiety. And it all
Yeah.
comes from the fact that the world didn't turn out the way it was supposed to. Like, it was Disney princess in my head. Like, I will make six figures, I will have a law degree, I will have respect in my field. And then this whole like rainbow of magic, happy leprechaun style amazingness is going to open up for me. And when I got my first end of year tax statement and it had six figures on it and nothing changed, I crashed hard.
Wow. Wow. And so how long did it take you between that point and deciding that you didn't need that six figures anymore and to go your own route?
I mean, some days the answer is I'll tell you when I get there. No, for me, so I had my first panic attack in March of 2016, started therapy, opened my business in November of 2017. So the first time that I uttered the words out loud, I don't want to be an attorney anymore, was probably July of 2017. And
Okay.
then I was going to go back to bartending. I think we've all had those moments where we feel like we took a horrible wrong turn somewhere. Our GPS failed us to the life that we want to have. And we think, I just need to hit the restart button and go back and retrace my steps and start over, figure out where I took the wrong turn. And what I didn't know then that I know now is that if you hit the reset button with the same mindset that you got to your current destination in life with, you will get to the same destination. It'll just have different wrapping paper, right? It'll
Sure.
look different. There will be different people around you. It might be a different city. It might be a different name. It will have the same problems. So
Hmm.
when somebody looked at me and they said, I think you should open your own law firm, I said, did you not hear me say that I'm going to go back to bartending because being an attorney is the vein of my existence? And they said, no, I don't think that's it. And this was my first real adult introduction to entrepreneurship. Everybody in my life that owned their own business or had this brave, let me go find my own way mentality passed away before I was an adult. So I had those influences really deep down. And then I didn't have anybody to talk to them
Hmm.
about as an adult. So this was my first real introduction to not having a boss. And I know now on the back end of this that words are incredibly powerful, because one of the things that I really wanted was freedom. And I remember sitting in my desk in my office behind my desk the first day I had my own business, thinking, I have made it. Nobody is going to tell me what to do. Well, nobody includes me, and I didn't for about 4 months.
Oh,
Like
wow.
I did nothing. And I learned real quick that if I wanted to be successful at business, I needed to surround myself with people who were successful at business. So I
Yeah.
would say the beginning of 2018 is when I really started on understanding business, entrepreneurship, and mindset. And then 2020, opened the coaching business. And
Okay.
2023, I made the decision to completely walk away from the full-time practice of law.
Okay. And so really it hasn't been that long since you've walked away from the full-time practice, but it was kind of a step-by-step
It was
journey
a,
for
yeah,
you.
transition period,
Hmm.
a
So
negotiation with myself about whether I trusted my choices.
yeah, which totally understandable. I will say I was, thinking, dreaming about this business for the last 2.5 years. And it wasn't until I was forced to make a decision that it was like, time to go, but like I could have sat thinking about that for many, many more years, like you did, before I really made that commitment and that change. So what is your, I want to get into your book, but also like you have such a fascinating story. I want to dig into this too, but tell me about what is your coaching business? Who is it that you're coaching?
Yeah, so I have, I think, two different avenues of people that really resonate with my message. The first are people like myself who have postgraduate educations or they have reached a level in their career that they had worked so hard to get to and nothing changed. And now they're fighting. I think we knew it growing up as like this midlife crisis where somebody goes out and gets a new wife and a red Camaro, right? They're looking for that thing that's going to bring the freedom that they thought all the hard work that they brought was going to bring. And
Mhm.
we're doing everything we can to keep them from blowing up their life so that they can focus on their career. And sometimes that means changing careers. And sometimes it means falling back in love with what you wanted. And sometimes, usually, almost always, it means figuring out what you thought your career was going to do for you that you weren't giving yourself to begin with, right? Very
Mhm.
rarely does it have anything to do with your job. I loved being an attorney because I got to help people where there are 9 million different ways in the world to help people. Being an attorney
Mhm.
was just the one that I visualized in my mind.
Yep.
So when we can step back and say, well, what was it that you thought all this hard work is going to give you and how else can we create that for you? Normally they say, oh, I really do love what I do. I just wasn't giving myself permission to have a life too. So that's kind of the first side. And then the
Mhm.
other side is people like yourself that have just started their first business and they're like, what the actual hell do I do now?
Yeah. Yep.
Right? Like the mindset is still that of a W-2. The mindset is still that of an employee.
Mm.
We're still trying to figure out what leadership is, what entrepreneurship is, what it is that we are going to spend our time doing when nobody is telling us that it's okay to go home. Are we going to work for 25 hours out of a 24-hour day? Figuring out that time management and that identity in this new industry. I do some of the business coaching side of things of your P&Ls and your strategy and what we're going to do as far as marketing and things to that effect. But I think there are other people that are so good at numbers and marketing, and I focus on mindset, sales, and identity.
Nice, nice. So I feel like you have to have a line out the door for your services because maybe it's just me and the people I'm around, but I feel like everyone gets to this point where they're like, if they're in a job, like I'll share my husband's story. Like he was a police officer and he was in that job for something like 11 years, whatever. And then he left that and was just like, it was his identity, but it was like everything he knew about himself, but also it was like he knew he didn't want to go back to it. And it was like, what do I do with myself? This was my degree, this is what I have done for the last 11 years.
Hmm.
And he went through a bit of an identity crisis. This was 12 years ago, but like he went through that for a while where it was just like, what am I, he felt lost.
Yeah.
And I know so many other people in my life too who like studied law and then decided this is not where I want to be. But now here you are, how many years later, and how deep in debt and all, and you're like,
Yeah.
how do I do this now? And then like my situation where it's like, I've kind of pivoted and now I'm starting a business. So I feel like you have to have so many people coming to you for that type of service. So tell me about, I'm going to use that to pivot to your book because I
Yeah.
want to find out like how does your book fit into that and what you do?
Yeah. So I want to just make a quick comment on what you said because there is a line out the door of people who want their problems solved in this arena. There is a much shorter line of people who are willing to go through the work to solve it. So
Mm,
there's the line out the door of people that are like, "Oh, you're right, that resonates with me." And then as soon as we start talking about what it takes to get to the other side of that line,
yeah.
it gets significantly shorter. And that's okay, right? I think part of whether you want to write a book, whether you want to start a podcast, whether you want to change careers, part of it is understanding that there's a choice. And the other part of it is understanding whether you're willing to do what it takes to make that choice. And
Hmm.
the answer to that, either yes or no, is still a choice. So it's that point between I have a problem and I'm ready for a solution that the majority of people live, and they will stay there until somebody really holds them accountable to getting out of it. So I
I
wanted
would
to,
have
because I
for
think there's
sure.
so many people that live in that space.
Hmm.
And then to answer your question about the book and how it really hits and resonates with this. So first of all, my book went through so many different iterations before it ended up being what it is now. This was not supposed to be the book that was written. At least I didn't think it
Okay.
was. I'm working on my second book now, and it's called Life Lessons from the Dog Park: What My German Shepherd Taught Me About Play, Purpose, and Perspective. And that was supposed to be the first book, at least in my head, that's what it was. And I
Okay.
kept trying to fit this dog park related book into my first book. And I kept talking about grief and trauma and bullshit. And eventually I gave in to the bullshit idea, and it took off. And I'm so glad that I did. The book itself, I think you'll resonate with this, and we can go deeper if you want a deeper explanation. This book is more the book I needed to write than the book I feel like my readers needed to read. Does that make any sense
Okay.
at all?
Yep.
Um, and that doesn't mean it's not valuable, and it doesn't mean that it's not impactful for people. I know now on the other end, when I start talking about writing my second book, that this book was written for me. It was my healing journey. It was, and I tell people all the time, you think you've healed from something, write a book about it, and you'll find out how wrong you are, because there's
Mm,
so much that you didn't know you still had that comes out when you write a book about it. So this book is all about my journey from panic attacks, anxiety, to standing in front of stages of 200, 300, 500 business owners and entrepreneurs and sharing those stories without shame, guilt, or fear of judgment. It's about repairing the relationships with the people that I have blamed for my life problems, which problems is relative, right? It's
hmm.
about owning and the responsibility that comes along with understanding that life always happens to you and for you at the same time. And you get to decide whether you stay on the to you side of the equation or the for you side of the equation.
Hmm.
It's digging into my experiences with grief, starting at the age of 7, going up to the age of 18 when my dad passed away, the way that that landed in my brain as and how as abandonment, and how hard it was for me to build relationships and kind of healing that process. So it is a mixture of personal grief, professional, all revolved around the idea of the stories that we tell ourselves and what it takes to understand that those stories are utter lies and that success is entirely up to you and what you make it out to be.
Wow. So is your, I guess I was thinking of this as like those folks who are, I mean, I guess like potential clients of yours, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
they're maybe going through some sort of career change or whatever. Like this was kind of like the stop with the excuses,
Mm-hmm.
start making those decisions, start moving forward. Because I've seen that, I right now on LinkedIn, it is not a good job market. And there are so many people on there who are I'll see a post every day that's like, I've been looking for a job for 278 days and somebody please help me. Like, and I see that now and I'm like, you can fix this. Like you can start
Yeah.
do what you can, there's ways that you can solve that problem without just somebody giving you a job. Like that's anyway. So in my mind, that's kind of what your book is about, but or like not about, but like how it helps people. But it's kind of
Hmm.
more like you talk about the grief. Is it more on that side and just kind of like what holds you back kind of emotionally, not just like your, I don't know.
Yeah. So are you familiar with NLP? Have you ever heard of neuro linguistics programming?
No.
Okay. So I train and certify neurolinguistics programming in Vegas, and that's kind of the science behind what I train and do. And the idea of NLP is that our world as we know it right now exists because of everything that's happened to us in our past, that you have a very different reality than I have. And I started digging into this science for business and sales and communication purposes and for being a better attorney. I wanted to understand how I could line 10 people up, ask them to tell me about the same incident, and I would get 10 different answers.
Mm,
Which 9 of those are lying? Well, what if none of them are lying? What if we all see the world differently because of our life experiences? So, our brain is best described as this computer program that filters out information in the way that we have told it to prioritize information. And that priority schedule is based on our life experiences, how we were raised, what our values were, excuse me, sorry, my dog's crying. My it's based on that filtering system of, what was it like when I meet somebody that says that they don't communicate well? Well, what was it like in your house with communication? Were you
mm,
taught at a young age that communication is a safe and healthy place to be? Or were you taught that if you share your experiences, you're going to be called stupid, or you're going to be yelled at, or you're going to be sent to your room? Were you taught through your parents of what a loving relationship is by the way that they looked at and treated each other? So the way that you see the world now as a business owner, and whether you are comfortable picking up the phone and making a cold call, or starting your own business, or pitching your services to a new agency, directly ties to the way that you see the world because of what happened as a child. So for me, the answer to your question is yes. People will come to me and say, I want to make more money. And I'll say, well, what was your relationship like with money as a kid? And they'll say, I don't want to talk about what it was like as a kid. And I say, then you don't want to make more money, because that is the only reason, the only way we get there. So I could write a book on the strategies, and I could write a book on what scripts could look like. And I could write a book on how to communicate effectively and what words to use. And if the programming that is in the reader's head says, if I use these strategies, I am going to get rejected or hurt or denied, or I'm going to be alone, or I'm not going to be lovable, or whatever that is, they're never going to use it. So the underlying conversation is always, what are you afraid of? What are you protecting yourself from? And where do those come from? So that we can redefine what these experiences mean to you, so that you can start using the tools and resources that you have spent years learning and understanding and unwilling to implement because you think it's going to hurt you in some way.
okay, you're making like way overthink my childhood and well, maybe not overthink, but like in ways where I'm like, I never thought about that before. I mean, and I would say like for me growing up, like money was not that money wasn't an issue. We weren't like, well off, but like money was never an issue in the fact that like, you know, dad just took care of things, right? Like,
Yeah.
so as an adult, it seems like my go-to would be like get a job and have somebody take care of me, right? Like in my in my job. I don't
Yeah.
know. Anyway, it sounds like I need to dig into this a little bit.
Yeah, well, do it with help, because whether it's a coach or whether it's a therapist that's trained in this world, you cannot solve problems with a brain that created those problems. So,
Mm-hmm.
that's where coaching really becomes a necessity, is in the fact that, we can only, Les Brown says it like this, you can't see the whole picture when you're in the frame. So if you
Mm-hmm.
picture the boundaries of this frame and this picture that you're in, there's this whole world outside of that we can't see or recognize, and that somebody else points out to us. And I know we've all experienced that, where you're having a conversation about a problem and somebody's looking at you like the solution is so clear. And we can always solve other people's problems so easily. And then
Hmm.
ours feel like the world is ending because they're our problems and they're emotionally tied to it.
Yeah.
Well, this is where
Yeah.
coaching really becomes invaluable when I can look at my clients and reframe the way they see their problems in seconds because it's not my problem. I can see the
Hmm.
roadmap so clearly.
Yeah. So one of the first things I did when I started my business was hired a coach. And I have somebody I'm working with. It's just a short period of time. So I definitely will check out your coaching program, but for after that ends. But tell me about or just where can people find out more about your coaching program? I'll link to your book in the show notes, but what are the other ways that people can find you and find out more about what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So the website is successdevelopmentsolutions.com. The website is under a rebrand right now with the book coming out. Well, I can't even say that anymore. The book came out a year and a half ago. So if we're going to talk about giving up excuses, I should probably stop blaming my 18-month-old book for my website being redesigned. So my website's being redesigned. So if it doesn't work, if for
Break through the
any reason
bullshit,
you go to the
Amber.
website, I know it really is. I'm telling you. What I'm trying to get out is that there is a Facebook group called the Break Your Bullshit Box community. It's free. You can request to join that through the Facebook group. You can have access to me. There's also on successdevelopmentsolutions.com, you'll find links for the podcast. I do a virtual course that is for people who are not local in Vegas, or if you want to travel to Vegas, we have incredible NLP trainings that are absolutely life changing.
Awesome. Cool. Well, we'll check those out. Okay. Last question. So my daughter is in college and wants to go to law school. Should I tell
Ah,
her not to go that route?
no. I tread this line carefully because people will ask me all the time. They're like, "Will you come talk to my law school class?" And I'm like, "Do you want them to continue going when I'm done? Because I need to know how to show up." Um, I don't think going to law school is bad. And I don't think that becoming an attorney is wrong. I am so thankful for my experiences as an attorney. And I say this with the least amount of ego as possible. It opens up doors for me that I have no business having opened, right? I get speaking engagements because I'm an attorney that sometimes I'm like, how did I end up on this stage? People look at what I accomplished as an attorney and it comes with an instant amount of credibility. What I would say to anybody who's going through any postgraduate profession or any training program at all is understand what it is that you think you're going to get at the end of that training program and make
Hmm.
sure that you have very real, tangible understanding. And this goes for any goal setting, very real, tangible understanding of a return on your investment, both time, money, energy, resources. Avoid the illusions of what you see in your head as possible for this career to override what's actually going on, right? And I mean, hell, I can talk about this as far as career. I can also talk about it from my relationship choices, right? How often do we date on possibility and do we date on potential? Right. I mean, I tell this story now. One of these days, I'm probably going to get sued for this, but I'm going to say it anyways. My ex was homeless when I met him. And for most people, you would be like, this probably isn't a good idea. And really broken Amber, who needed a project other than herself to work on, was like, I mean, I can work with this. It's not really that bad, right? So when I look back on that, I'm like, the Amber I am now would never put myself in those situations. But we date on potential and we date on based on what we think we're worth. Well, we chase
Hmm.
careers based on potential, and we chase careers based on what we think we're worth. We do every decision based upon those things. So the feedback that I would give and the suggestions I would give is just go into it understanding what you want and having a no bullshit check-in system to make sure that you're on track and being willing to pivot. Like there's no shame in saying I
Yeah.
did this and it wasn't what I wanted and now we're going to do something different and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will make
So I
sure
know
that she
that was a
listens
long
to this.
answer, but that's the
No,
best I can give you.
it's great. I'm going to make sure she listens to this one. Well, thank you, Amber. Thank you so much for coming on. This was a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate your time and yeah, thank you.
I love the way you say fascinating to cover up the fact that it was a total shit show of rabbit holes. But I
No,
loved it. I
no.
loved it. And hopefully your listeners at least laugh and get some resources out of it.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
For a community of women writers to support and inspire you on your journey? Join the Author Power Circle. Connect weekly with fellow authors, stay accountable, and move your book forward in an encouraging community. Learn more at kellyshuckneck.com.